Welcome everyone. You're in the right place to see IMAGINiT Clarity for Revit. Get your own Revit robot with your presenter, Joe Ikens here. Joe, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Jenna. And like she said, thanks everybody for taking some time out of your day to join us. Hopefully the information that we'll be chatting about here will be all good and wonderful and interesting. Keep it as lively as possible. Have some fun through here if we can. Again, my name is Joe Ikens here. I'm the division manager for IMAGINiT's Building Solutions technical team across North America. And really the purpose that we have here is to talk about this whole idea of Clarity, a Revit robot. And Clarity itself is a piece of software that IMAGINiT's been developing over the years, like 8 years, 9 years almost, for a number of different things. But with the overall purpose in mind, the overall objective is to really just take anybody who interacts with a Revit model, let alone model managers, BIM managers, or others, but just anybody who has to interact with Revit, Revit data, just anything in those lines, and try to make your lives a little bit better. Try to make it a little bit less painful than it might have been otherwise. And we'll do it through a number of different types of things, but if we go throw ourselves into that Wayback Machine and go into that 8 years ago, 9 years ago type of time frame where we're thinking, how can we do some things? If our purpose as IMAGINiT Technologies, we're here to make you more successful, to help you set up an environment in which you are able to thrive and to be all that you can be. How do we do that? Why do we do that? What are the types of issues or problems or things that are going on that we might be able to have some level of an impact on? And as we're looking at it, depending on your role within the company that you're in, there's maybe a few different types of things that you would be running into, a little bit of challenges that you're hitting into, of just no time in the day. There's just, life is chaotic, and we got to try and figure out a way to break through that chaos to get something done, order to chaos, if you want to call it that way. I don't know if you're anything like me, but it seems like spend most of our time fighting fires as opposed to being strategic about different things within your organization, within your particular job duties. You're doing something with Revit, something with BIM, but it's a challenge. It's time. Time is critical. Time is essential, and it's very, very precious. And there are times when we'll run into problems with the Revit models that we're in and just comes out of left field at us. There's occasions where we've worked with various clients over the years where we'll get a call and say, hey, my Revit file is crashing, can you give us some help? And we'll do what we can, try to work with the data that we've got available, recover what we can, start to come up with some workflows to help prevent some of those types of things from happening again. But it's hard. If it was easy, everybody would do it right, but there's a bunch of things that are coming through here, and these all tend to pull us away from what our real opportunity is, what our real job is inside the company that we work for. Beyond that, going further, maybe not you, maybe people that you work with who are going through and saying, well, I've got a project manager, project engineer, project architect, whatever level title person you have out there that needs to have access to some of this Revit stuff, but is not the right person to be running Revit. It's just not them. Whatever reason, there's plenty of reasons for people to have different types of roles and features and functions. Maybe they're just that person that's got some sort of just curse when it comes to technology, so they tend to stay away. Whatever it might happen to be, but we need to get things done for them, and more often than not, that ends up being a spot where, well, they come and interrupt somebody else. Hey, I need some documents printed out for this. Can you do that for me? So let's go away from what I'm doing, come back to whatever else is there. Disruptions are constantly bombarding us through all of this. So that's possibilities. And beyond that, if we're looking at all these different types of things, when we're considering this whole idea of clarity, those are the types of events, those are the types of things that happen in life that we're trying to focus on. And what can we do to try and make some of these things better? If we can develop a piece of software, and obviously we have because we're talking about this whole Clarity thing, this Revit robot, but if we can do that, then we can start to have a positive impact on the people that we work with, a positive impact on you, on your colleagues, on your business, so that if you went to school for architecture, you can focus on being an architect again. If you went to school for engineering, you can focus on engineering and not some of these other ancillary things that are kind of important, but not what you're here for. It's not your purpose in life. So let's start working through that a little bit. So what sort of impact does all of this type of thing have on your firm? And you can roll through different types of ROI calculations pretty easily. There's the idea with clarity is we want to take some of these things that are important things, like creating PDFs, it says here, extracting DWG files, taking that information and pulling it out of Revit so that we can send it from Revit to civil engineers or other project stakeholders that are not in the Revit platform. Create PDFs, because everybody has to create PDFs at different stages inside the design, so let's do that. And how much time do you spend doing those things? And as you're doing that, how much time, maybe if it's not you doing it, how much time does it have somebody else coming to you or a colleague to do that for them? And it just, time comes into money. And just thinking about things, there's a client of ours, I'm coming to you from Denver, Colorado. There's a client of ours that was working with a bunch of things in Clarity, and they were setting up different types of things for this Revit Robot to do for them that ended up freeing up almost all of a day, almost every Friday. They would spend some time doing a whole bunch of things. We'll get into some details coming in here pretty soon, but it would encompass, absorb, half to 3/4 of every Friday, just watching progress bars, letting their computer chunk through things. And it was important, had to be done, but it didn't add value to the project. So what can we do to add this back and get value to the project? So the amount of time that it'll be for you is going to vary. It's based off of you, the type of projects you work on, and somebody who works on hospitals or high-rises is going to have a different impact on this than somebody that might be doing big-box commercial stores. The variations are all over the place, but I'll ask that as we're talking about these things, understanding what this value can be, of placing it into your own personal context of what's happening inside your world, of what are we doing, how are we doing that. And the way we want to be thinking about this is, if we've got all these things that we're working through, we had the issue of people that are interrupting you or other staff within your organization to get things done. We had the issues of just the constant bombardment of distractions that are coming around all through all these different things, and the amount of time that ends up sucking out of our available workday, our lives, to get things done. And all of that comes down to money. So what would be the value to you, to your firm, if we were able to turn around and take, hey, this is a Clarity thing. There's a Revit Robot out there where if somebody says, hey, I need an up-to-date set of PDF files, I need a physical printout of check set of the project of where we are right now, instead of having to go through and absorb your time doing that, of saying, maybe we ought to call him Robbie the Revit Robot, get some good alliteration going on through here. But, Robbie, let's go do this thing for me. The robot takes off, takes care of those things, starts running on for you, and you get to still focus on what's in front of you, what's important, what is more strategic, what is adding value to your project, because we've now got this robot sitting off in the corner doing all those types of things for you instead of you doing it yourself. Now, if we're looking at it from a Clarity standpoint, there's a whole, as my son would say, crap ton of things that's out there that could be done inside this whole Clarity environment. But within all of those things that are out there, we're going to focus on two major categories of things that this Revit Robot can run with for you. And we're going to focus on automation and insights. Now, as background, there's also some other places where we've got a module where this Revit Robot can interact with ProjectWise as a data source. We've got a module that has some extra things built in from an owner's standpoint of doing different types of reporting and gathering of information about the data in a Revit project. We've got a module that if for some reason you need to get live collaboration, but the BIM 360 world doesn't work for you, there's a module we can add on to this to add security to Autodesk Revit server and get some VPN connections running between firms and doing some live collaboration on your hardware. There's some extra modules through here that are some really interesting things that can happen. That being said, though, we're focusing on these things, automation and insights, and we're going to have our Revit Robot working with us to help get all these things done on our behalf. So starting off with this idea of automation, that's really what robots are for. You take anything, any process that you can run through that's repeatable, and you feed it into a computer, Robbie the Revit Robot, and let that thing just keep on repeating it, just over and over again, at whatever scheduled basis we need, at whatever frequency we need, on demand, whatever it's got to be, we'll set it up. So you, on your device, whether we're talking about any device with a modern browser, so a laptop, PC, Windows, Mac, tablet, phone, whatever, we've got a device that has access to your robot. You say, hey, go do this for me, please, and the robot takes off and starts doing things, and just has it and takes it for fun from there. And there's a whole list of items that we can automate through our Revit Robot. The generation of any of those different types of things that we can extract out of a Revit file. We'll get to a full list here in a minute. We can take Dynamo scripts, Dynamo graphs that you might have created internally, and the Revit Robot can run them automated, unattended for you. So there's all these different types of things we can have. Create something, extract some PDFs, deposit wherever you need them to go to. And if we look at that whole list of things that are out there, of all the items that this Clarity Robbie the Revit Robot can do for you, it starts to stack up pretty quickly. And the reason I'll say that is if we look at what's happening from data that we've been able to receive from our clients, on average, we're saving 284 hours annually per project. So just to help describe the numbers through here, we take that as that big number, 460,000 hours that IMAGINiT clients have been saving by letting the Revit Robot take on things for them so they can focus on other things in business and life and whatever. And if we take that total number of hours and we say, okay, of all those projects that are out there, of the projects that run a task, on average once a day per business day, how long does that task take? And we came out to, it was about 7 or 8 minutes. We take that amount of time for just that one task, then say, okay, on average, how many tasks is the average project running on any given day, and annualize that over the course of a business year. And that comes out to say, if you have the theoretical project that is a 12-month-long project, you'll have, on average, you'll be running tasks that account for 284 hours worth of effort. It's 284 hours worth of effort that you don't have to do anymore. That's the example I gave you before, where we had our client here in Denver who was saving half to 3/4 of a day every week and returning that to him so he can start doing something that matters more to himself, to the company, to the project. He can start doing some things that really, truly start to matter in here. And if we look at the numbers, these are huge numbers. They start to some extent, they just get big and they don't mean anything. I can say that our largest Clarity client is saving over 100,000 hours already. It's just crazy what these types of things can do. So I wanted to take a little bit and have some fun with it too, but take a little bit here and try to break down what does 284 hours mean. If I can save you 284 hours, more to the point, if Robbie the Revit Robot can save you 284 hours over the course of a year, what's that mean? So there's a couple things through here. All of these coming from facts that I got from the internet, so take it with your grain of salt to the level of truth, but I'll believe this. Just walking burns a certain number of calories per hour. It depends on how fast you walk and body type and all those other types of things. But if you walk for 280 hours, you could burn off 22 pounds of fat. I don't know about you, but personally, if I could have something that freed up some time so I could drop 20 pounds, I'm okay with that. Maybe you're on the bulking up side of things, so that maybe instead of that you can gain 12 pounds of muscle, because muscle is always harder to build up than if it is for fat to lose, and building up fat or whatever the workout theories are. But that's huge. 93 Major League Baseball games. Taking from the baseball and basketball games, on average, how long is the typical basketball game? How long is the typical Major League Baseball game? Find a mix of those. Maybe you're watching 45 Major League Baseball games and 60 basketball games because of what the Revit robot here is saving for you. I live in Denver. I want to get my wife some pizza. So I'm going to drive from Denver to Chicago to get a slice of pizza and bring it home. I can do that 10 times within that amount of time that we're looking at. The Academy Awards. That one I took a little bit more liberty with some of the times. There's 90 some odd movies out there that have won the award of Best Picture. I could watch all of those and half of them twice within this amount of time. Fly to the moon. I mean, all these different types of things. This starts to give us an idea of, how big is this thing that we're looking at? What does it mean for us to be able to save 280 hours? It's fun to look at it in this context, but it starts to make a little bit more, to me, relevance of what that time is. Yeah, maybe not flying to the moon all the time, that's what it is, but these start to hit home of what does it really mean to be able to save 280 hours. If I go down to this a little bit further and take a look at this from a little bit more self-serving perhaps, but you could say, hey, in that 280 hours through here, I can take an IMAGINiT Revit Architecture Fundamentals class. Because, hey, it's always something where I can start learning more about Revit. Maybe it's not me taking this class, maybe it's somebody I work with, but the Revit robot can free up that time so that somebody could do that during the course of a year. But it's not just that. I could take that Revit Architecture Fundamentals class and Revit MVP and structure and BIM management and landscape and InfraWorks and 3D Studio and all of these within that amount of time. So if we get this Revit robot out there, look at the value of time that it's freeing up. So maybe me, maybe whoever, whatever, can take all of these classes. And not only that, but within all of these classes, we're still fitting into some time where I've got another 4 days left over. I'm taking a long weekend. Forget that. I've got my Revit robot working for me. I can go through, take all of these different types of classes and still have, Thursday, Friday, Monday, Tuesday on vacation because of the time that's coming from that, just on average per project. Now take this and roll it to the next thing in your mind, that not only is this a per project thing, and this is all the time that's saving, but if you have 5 concurrent projects at any given point within your firm, take all of this and multiply it by 5. If you've got 20 projects at any given point running inside your firm, take all of these things times 20. Instead of saving 280 hours, all of a sudden we're what, at 5,600 hours annually that we're saving through this type of automation. Starting to become a pretty big deal here. Starting to understand what this is all about. Now, if we're going to do all this, and I can promote, and we've got the numbers and things that we can point to say this is exactly how and what our clients are running through and where the averages are coming from, they're legitimate numbers. If we've got all that in place and we're wanting to get to the next part, it's like, well, Joe said all these things of clarity can save the time, but what specifically are the types of things that we can do that might start saving this time for me? And that'll get into a bunch of data slides. Sorry for this to some extent, but if we're getting into that detail of what are all the types of things that Clarity can do, this is page 1 of 2 of all the different types of things that we can pull off just through task automation inside that Clarity, Robbie the Revit Robot world. All the different types of exports that you're seeing on the left-hand side. PDF is going to be the task that is run most often across any client anywhere that's using Clarity. Everybody does PDFs, right? DWGs are going to be high up in that list. Navisworks files, publishing those becomes high in that list of things that we'll do. We're able to take the information that's locked up inside this Revit file, the parameter data, the I of BIM, and we're able to take all of that data and extract it out to a database. the Revit database extract. It's taking the information, putting it into a SQL database. Once it's in that SQL database, then all of a sudden, it's open data. We can start doing all sorts of interesting things through there. We've got some of our clients that are taking that data once we pulled it into SQL and starting to read it and work with it in other types of business intelligence solutions, Power BI, Tableau, things like that. It's open data now. We can do all sorts of fun things with it if you want to. Pulling it from that model metrics of information about your Revit files. We'll get deeper into model metrics in a little while here. Cleaning up your Revit files. If you think about your process of what do you do when you send your Revit file to other people that are working with you on a project, what do you do? What's typical in your process? Do you clean out views? Do you audit and purge? Do you compact? Do you delete views that aren't on sheets? What are all the different types of things that you do to want to prepare your model for sending? And for that matter, when you receive a model, what are the types of things that are typical that you do to that Revit file or wish that you had time to do to that Revit file as you receive them? Your Revit Robot can take care of all those types of things for you, for transmitting, for sending out, or when you receive those different files. All sorts of interesting, fun things that is the sole purpose of trying to do what we can to make your life better, to put you in a situation where you can succeed and thrive. BIM 360 Glue Classic, publishing that out. All sorts of fun things through there. Getting beyond that, I said we had 2 pages of this. Here we go further. We can work with the Autodesk Cloud. We'll take data from wherever it happens to sit, on your file server, in Revit server, Collaboration for Revit Classic or Next Gen, wherever it needs to go. If you're not using some of those Autodesk Cloud tools, we can do snapshots and comparison of different Revit files, what really changed between version 1 and version 2, and work through that with you. The Autodesk Cloud has that too, so there's a little bit of overlap here. That's fine. But our Revit Robot can take care of analyzing those things and spitting out that information for you to be able to use to get you set up to be immediately productive instead of trudging through the myriad of things that might be going on through there. Different types of viewers that we have for seeing the model inside your Clarity web portal. Server project backups, family upgrades, bulk family upgrading, bulk model upgrading, analyzing your content library to say what families are actually being used, how complex are they, how large are the families, how many nested components do they have, how many projects are using that family, how many models are using that family, how many instances are using. There's all sorts of things we can understand about your Revit content so that you know is the right content being used, and run from that. As we mentioned, from custom tasks, we can have your Dynamo scripts that you create, and we can have Robbie the Revit Robot run them. Or if you need to, and you're a programmer type, there's an API, so you can tweak this till the cows come home if you need to. There's a lot that's going on. And overall, the process that we'll have for that is we'll take the data from where your models live. The time comes to run a task, so it's either scheduled time, every day at 2 a.m., wake up and do these things, or at 1:30 in the afternoon, you need something to happen, so you click a button to let it go. Whatever initiates the start, your Clarity portal running on your hardware inside your office says, let's go, and it starts to run all these tasks through one or multiple task processors. These are going to be computers that have access to Revit, can open up the Revit files and do all these things. Because this idea of the Revit Robot, there's a lot of truth to that idea. Because that Revit Robot is this thing sitting in the corner, and normally if you were to go through, and we'll say PDFs, you're generating PDFs, you would open the Revit file, you would find the sheet set or whatever it is that you're going to be printing, you batch print all those things, watch the progress bar go through. If you need to, rename the files as they're being created, and then when it's done, you take the files, make sure they're in the correct folder off on your network or wherever it's got to be, you shut down the file and wait for the next thing to come in that you've got to do. The Revit Robot is doing the same. It's opening your Revit files. We'll actually open it detached from Central to make sure that we're not impacting your production work. The only exception to that is the Dynamo task. Dynamo, you have the option. You choose whether you want to run on the detached version, which is the default, or you can tell it to run on a live version of the Revit file so that your Dynamo graph can run, make changes to the file, and then sync to Central. But still, you got that robot in the corner doing all these things for you. And when it's done, again, depositing those in those output locations off on the right-hand side. This is all encapsulated in your environment. There's no cloud involved here unless you're reading files from BIM 360 or depositing files up there. It's your hardware, you're managing it, you've got full control, access permissions, everything, you name it. So if that's what it's all about, and I've had 20 minutes or whatever talking through here of what all these things are, let's take a second and see what that Revit Robot interface is looking like. So some live examples of what that is. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to a web page here, and this is our Clarity site. This one, it happens to be that it's sitting up in the Microsoft Azure cloud. That's where we placed it. I've got servers that are in Azure. I've got servers that are sitting on physical hardware inside our IMAGINiT network. Physical machine, virtual machine, doesn't matter. It's just a server running a Windows operating system. Let's take it, let's go. If I've got all of my different projects through here and I want to grab something, I've got an example project here, click on that tile and it opens up the project. I've got a welcome message, can tell people whatever I want, telling me what versions this Revit file is, how many different versions it has been saving. If I needed to, I could customize that table to even tell me what service pack number is in there. A little bit of a rabbit hole here. If you turn it on, and by default it is on, we'll also have the ability of Clarity to be able to tell you whenever somebody opens and does a sync to central of your Revit file using a different service pack than the current version of your Revit file. So if somebody's on service pack 2 and somebody else opens up the file in service pack 3, hits sync to central, Clarity will be able to notice that and send you an email saying, hey, by the way, it looks like this person opened and worked in the Revit file using a different build number. Here's the information. At that point, you've got that data and say, oh, looks like I forgot somebody to install a service pack. Or, yeah, I know that we're just slowly working it across the company, but it'll help identify inconsistencies because working on different service pack levels can be a prelude to possible issues with the Revit file. We've seen it sometimes, not everywhere, but sometimes it can happen. So I come up to this site, and if I want to do any sort of a task, whatever tasks are allowed for me, I'll have in this drop-down list here. So if I want to check the Performance Advisor, it's 18 different things that Autodesk has identified that can have a negative impact on Revit performance. So I want to update that. So I hit go, and that task was created. In the background, this server is talking to that army of Revit robots that I've got out there. They're going to open up the Revit file, detach from Central, take it, run it through all of these 18 checks, and then spit out a report. I'll get an email when it's done saying, hey, I finished this task. Click here to go access your project and see your stuff. Well, how do we see that stuff? Well, one thing I can do is if I come down here, I've got my architectural file. I'll just focus on that for a moment. I'll click this View button over on the right-hand side, and it'll start to show me the data, all the things I've done with this Revit file. How big is it? It's a small file. I've extracted DWF files, DWGs, FBXs, IFCs, all these different types of things. I've also extracted various reports over time. There's all sorts of things that exist in here that I can start working with. For some things, like PDFs, I'll just have a native tab in my browser where I can look at those items directly here inside the web page. So if I want to see my signage drawings, I can go ahead and select on that item and be able to see that PDF inside here. It can be PDFs where it's one sheet per file, or if I come way down through here, somewhere up higher, I guess, alphanumeric, gotta love it, I'll have a spot where I can have a multi-sheet PDF sitting through here, but it's just all a matter of PDF files. I'll look at it full screen, but at this point, it's a PDF, right? I can go ahead and decide that I want to print it. I can download a copy, email it out to somebody else, but it's all just data about my Revit file, and I'm viewing it just through this Revit portal. If I want to, I can also start checking performance. As the Revit robot is doing all these things, we're logging information. How long is it taking for the robot to open the file? How long is it taking for anybody to sync to Central? Now, all of this is the robot collecting data from itself and from other Revit users so that they can go through and say, well, let's make XYZ happen. Now, this type of thing is where we're seeing the details of what came out of that particular item. We'll be able to track what the process is of that robot's task. Says, hey, I'm extracting all these different rules. I'm going to place the file in this particular location. Here's all the data, what I've got happening, what I have done in the past. So we've got a log of all these things the robot has done for you. This project hasn't been around for too long, but already it's saved me 2 hours worth of time in my life that it's doing things that I don't have to. And this is just that idea of the robot taking care of me so I can focus on the things that matter. I get my Fridays back, or whatever other day of the week it might happen to be. Maybe I'm just leaving on time. You know, heaven forbid something like that happens. But I had mentioned there's a few different ways that we can launch off some of these different types of tasks that we've got out there. What we had here was launching a task through just the Clarity web page. Well, it's a web page, right? That means that, like I said before, any device running a modern browser can get to this thing and do the same. So if I come down here, I've got some screen mirroring going to an iPad. I've done this on iPads, on Android phones. Again, anything with a modern browser, we're good to go. So inside here, in my project, I'll tap on the Health Clinic project. This happens to be one where the files are located in BIM 360 Design, BIM 360 Next Gen. If I wanted to look at any information through here, if I wanted to launch a task, I've got that same exact list of items of what I can launch from here, different projects, so different types of tasks that I've got set up. If I wanted to have this particular project, update my metrics. How is my Revit file performing? I'll choose Model Metrics, tap on the Run button. Same thing happens. It says, great, I've started up your task. Let's go look at things. If I wanted to look at my architecture model, clicking on the View link here, same stuff applies. We're just using your native PDF viewers. We're using your native whatever items to be able to see and understand what's going on inside your particular file. And from anything. So I can be wherever with an internet connection. Maybe I've got to activate a VPN tunnel to get back into the company, but I've been in coffee shops, airports, hotels, home, wherever, connected to the Revit Robot Clarity system and launched something so that by the time I'm done and I get back to the office, I get to wherever my destination is, that task is done and I'm ready to start working with and looking at things inside my model. And all of that is coming from whether we're on, again, PC, tablet, phone, a device with access to your robot, access to your Clarity portal, and you're good to go. It's pretty nice. And all of this is happening. None of that is running on my computer. Now, I do have a session of Revit down here, but if I open up that session of Revit, it happens to have that clinic file open. The reason for this is that we have a ribbon panel for Clarity. I'll pull this out so we can see it a little bit better. I had the way we could go to the website to launch a task. Well, if I'm a Revit user and I finished doing a bunch of different things, I hit Sync to Central and I'm ready for just a batch print of something to happen, instead of printing from my computer and locking my computer up so I can watch a progress bar for the next 5 minutes, 30 minutes, 2 hours, how long does it take for you to generate PDFs or extract DWGs? Or maybe it's all of those things and then more. But here I can just say, great, I'm done. Let's go ahead and launch a task from within Revit. And I'll say, let's go ahead and maybe publish my file to the public side of the BIM 360 site. So I'll run that, and it started off that particular task. My computer's not doing anything. If I needed to, I can come back to launch the task and say, you know what, let's also in here do a database export so that I can get some updated information about my Revit file inside there. And all of these things are happening and rolling inside this environment. My computer's ready to go. I can do whatever the heck I need to from here. The robot is taking over for all those different things for me. Back over to that web page for a minute. If we come back here, so we had 3 different ways we could launch a task. There's also this idea that we can have these things run for me. So I don't have to go to a site and say, oh yeah, let's go do this. There's a client of ours who the big thing they had out of using this robot to do things for them was the idea that as they're setting up and working with some of these different tasks, let's say this PDF task, instead of just something where I've got to remember to hit that button before I leave at the end of the day, well, instead, let's take this. This is my PDF task. It's going to run Monday through Friday at, I don't know, we'll say, well, this is a 24-hour clock, so this will be, what, 8 o'clock at night? Every day at 8 o'clock at night, it's going to launch and update PDFs. so that I get into the office the next morning, it's all done. The idea of automation, I could have Clarity go through and do that publish option for a BIM 360 project so that the website gets updated with current graphics every day, once a week, instead of every week choosing some time. Maybe it's going to be monthly on the 1st and 15th of any given month. We have this set up to go, and I don't have to think about it. It's just done. The robot wakes up at 2 o'clock in the morning and does something. Robot wakes up at 7 o'clock in the evening, does something for me. We can schedule that out to happen the way you need it to be. And with this being trying to be a smart robot about it, there's all sorts of extra things we might be able to do. Like in here, it's printing out a PDF where we're putting it, having it, the PDF file name is the sheet number, a dash, and then the sheet name. If I click on a little browse button over here, there's all sorts of different things. All the parameters that I've got inside my sheets are things that robot can use to build up the correct sheet name. Maybe I want the revision number to be after this. So sheet number, sheet name, and then a dash, and then the revision number. And that becomes part of the file name that I'm printing out. Maybe I want the date in there. All those things can happen. If we're looking at what sheets am I printing, I get to print everything. I can go to a drop-down list and get all of my sheet sets from the Revit files and choose which one of these sheet sets am I printing. Or, again, hit a browse button, maybe say print if it appears in the sheet list. So if this file is somewhere in a sheet index, print it. Or if this is in the sheet index and is part of revision number 3, add those in. So it's in the sheet index and part of Rev 3, print out that sheet. Has nothing to do with the sheet indexes. I'm just telling my robot, here's what I want you to do, and it'll go off and do those things for me. It's a matter of trying to be, smart with it so that the robot can do as much for you as possible as we're working through all of these different things. And that type of work, that type of setup of what we've got for these tasks appears for all of the different types of tasks that we can run. And there's a good-sized list of things through here. It's all those things we saw back on those 2 other slides of the data and the information we can push around from Revit. All of these things, and then start stacking them together. Every Friday, do you need to submit Revit files and update your PDF set, extract DWG files, transfer them to the civil or whoever people are not using Revit but are working on the project, check the file for performance, take a snapshot of all of your existing background files that you're linking in to the people that you're working with, and prepare for getting a new file for all those things. We can link all those together to what's called a task sequence and do that every Friday. So normally if all those steps for you would have taken an hour, 2 hours, 4 hours, how big's your project? How many do you have going on? It'll do that for you every Friday. Then maybe every Monday morning, 2 a.m. or something before you get into work, it'll go the other direction and say, you know what, let's go ahead and take all the files that I can update from the people that are sending me updated backgrounds, redo the snapshot, compare the 2 snapshots together so I can see what's really different in that background. Did the architect change some walls around and forget to tell me? That happens, that's life, that's fine. We're people, we do that. Did the electrical engineer move some lighting around and not communicate that to the architect, or power or this or that or the other? All those different things, we can find that through those snapshot comparisons now instead. And all those things happening for you so you can focus on your building, your project, your design, your engineering, the things that you're actually a professional to do. Let's let Clarity, the Revit Robot, take on those types of things for you. Now, from there, we'll hop out of this for a moment, come back to it in a second. But there's one specific set of things that we do need to try and make sure I want to make sure that we're focusing on a little bit. That's this idea of metrics. As IMAGINiT, we've been getting more and more requests lately for people to say, hey, can you take a look at my file and how am I doing? Or I know there's some weird things going on with this file. Can you help me take a look at it? And that's fine. We're happy to do that, but that's a little bit too late, because if you're coming to us, and please do, if you're coming to us when there's a problem, we'll help you solve the problem. We'll help you get back up and running, but it'd be all that much better if instead of getting to a spot where things are acting wonky or there's crashing happening or file corruption happening, what if we were able to identify some metrics about your project and identify if it's leading in a bad direction and get out ahead of things to fix it before it truly becomes a problem. It's trending in the wrong direction. That's this idea of insights, of metrics. There's actually, I think we're up to 60 different metrics right now. It's a constantly growing type of thing, but 60 different points of data about your Revit file that we'll be able to track and track over time. Some of those elements are going to be things that are directly related to performance. Some of them reflect warning information. In fact, one of the things we can do is tell you how many warnings you've got inside your Revit file. Is that a critical thing that we're running on? Are they trending in a positive or negative direction? We can take those performance criteria that we got from Revit, from Autodesk, and build those into these same metrics to say, you know, how many overlapping walls do I have? It's like a warning, but it's a pretty big deal when it comes to performance. Do I have any really large pattern-filled areas, hatched areas, or complex hatched areas with multiple internal loops? That can have a negative impact. Do I have a large-scale view that's set to a fine level of detail instead of coarse? Could I have cropped the view instead of leaving it uncropped? All these different types of things that this robot can go out there and look and find for you and start giving that information back to us in different types of graphs so we can track it over time. That middle mountain that we've got, the file size for this architecture file, it was getting bigger, and then somewhere back in December, the file size started dropping. Probably somebody did some model size maintenance. They purged. They saved as a new central file. They did all these different things that we might do once in a while to our Revit files to get the file size down again. The open time that we're seeing on the right-hand side, this particular file, whichever one it was, back in May had a little bit of a spike in the file open time. Maybe somebody tried to open it up across a VPN connection across the wide area network. Who knows what was happening, but it peaked and then it came back down, so we were okay. June, July, some other things were happening, but we're able to see trends, maybe in the mountain graph as it's getting up above 200. Maybe you're used to working on small files, and 200 is a big deal. 200 megs for a Revit file is a big Revit file. If that's the case for you, then we can say, hey, this is getting to our danger territory. Let's take a look at that Revit file before people come to me and start talking about this isn't working well or my performance is poor or whatever. Let's get out ahead of things. We'll have some graphs like the thing on the left-hand side where green is where something's trending in a positive direction. It's getting smaller. Red is where it's trending in a negative direction. It's getting bigger. So how are these things rolling out? We can have it be proactive or reactive. Your Revit robot is sitting there in the corner, and it can say, you go to the robot and say, hey, what's my model size looking like? And it will come back and say, here's your trend. Or we can say, hey, Robbie, the Revit robot, let's be a little more proactive, and let's have you come tell me when certain things have been triggered. So in this case, what we're looking at the left-hand side, this thing called a model alert, you have the ability inside Clarity to tell your Revit robot of all the warnings that are out there, which ones are important. What are high urgency? What are low urgencies? What are those that are in the middle? So we have high, medium, and low severity of the different Revit warnings. And Revit Robot, go out there, and if the total number of high severity warnings grows by 10% between different runs of checking the metrics, send me an email right away. And so I'll get that email that we run that metrics task. Robbie, the robot, takes a look at things and says, well, the number of these high severity warnings did rise by 10%. Maybe it's because it went from 10 to 11 warnings. That's a 10% jump. Maybe it went from 100 to 110. Well, whatever the issue is, it's going to tell me that, and I can start working with that project team to say, hey, let's resolve some of these high urgency warnings. I won't worry about as much the ones that are medium or low urgency, but let's worry about those high urgency ones. For all the different rules that we have set through there, there's 60 different pieces of data that we can collect. Not all of them are going to be important to everyone. So of the ones that are important to you, to your firm, you can say, well, what's an appropriate file size? What's an appropriate file open time? Depending on the projects you're on, the hardware you've got, things like that. A file open time of 5 minutes might be a good day for you. File open time of 5 minutes might have you just getting ready to just get into some sort of fisticuffs with somebody because it's just not right. Well, based off of those things that are relative to you, we can go through and say, hey, Revit Robot, let's go ahead and tell me, give me a status check on my Revit files. Am I good, warning, or in danger territory, green, yellow, red dots, so that I can get out there either proactively or reactively and start taking care of my Revit environment, taking care of things so that if I was running into spots where, based off of the health and quality of the Revit files, things weren't running as well as they could. Maybe there's crashing, maybe there's corruption, maybe it's just slow, maybe it's whatever, but now we're running in a better way. Our Revit environment's more efficient so that my people can be more efficient. So looking at that, if we go back to that same web portal, all of that data, by running that metrics task, I'll be able to go through, and for each project, I'll be able to see those model metrics down here, and for the rules that I have set up, this one's a little more simple, where are we good at? If I needed to, this architecture file, number of warnings, it's got 255 warnings. The rules that we set up for this server says that's bad. It's a small file, so yeah, that's probably not the greatest thing we could have. Number of views not on sheets, 362. Well, maybe there's a little bit of cleanup we can do there. On a small project, why are there 362 views that aren't on sheets? Let's talk about that. Let's get, maybe this is an opportunity for education. 70 in-place families. Chances are somebody built a model for something and copied it all around the place inside this model. As a best practice, that's probably not the best way to go, assuming that that's true, but we're starting to flag things for your attention so that you, as the person working inside Revit on this file, whatever title you might have, we can focus your attention. Your Revit Robot feeds you the data, the information, so that you can focus your attention on the things that matter and have the best possible positive impact on you and those around you. The graphs area here is where we'll be able to see the timeline of these different elements. And we've got a few extra of these that we may not need to have here all the time, but for all these different metrics, myself and other people that are using this server, we've added these things in to say, hey, these are the metrics that are most important, so are they going up or down by certain values? If I wanted to, this is between the, this current run and the previous run of metrics, the last 7 days, 30 days, how are they trending? If I look down a little bit further, let's say the file open time, element O, for the architecture file, how is that trending? And overall, it's been pretty flat at, all of 10 seconds to open up the file. A couple blips here and there, but it's sitting pretty solid. So whatever those issues are, the red, green, yellow dots that I've got, it's not having a dramatic impact on performance now, but part of that is because it's only a 42 meg file. So we've got some things to balance off. We're getting context for what's going on. And we'll be able to see this for all of the files that are sitting in my current project right here. Now, if I'm an elevated user, a power user, or a Clarity Revit Robot administrator, I can go up to the very top of the screen here and start looking at globally tasks and also globally my metrics. And this is where I can see for all of these projects, everything with this pink background is a project that has at least one red dot in it somewhere. So this example project that we had before, these are where we've got the red and yellow dots. If I needed to, I can see summaries of what are the most common types of rule violations that I'm running into so that we can maybe look at some lunch and learn topics or other types of things to help with the team. If I'm looking at graphs, we'll be able to start looking at all those different elements. The firm standards is where we can set up what's important to you. This is where, if you want to call it programming your robot, that's one way we can go about it, but it's where I can say, of all the things that are out there, if the file size goes from 0 to, we'll say 0 to 175 megs, green dot, everything's happy, I don't care, I'm fine. If it's between 0 and 250, I'm okay with that. I give it a yellow dot, but I'm not in the happiest spot. If it's over 250 megs, give it a red dot because I've only got 2 gigs of RAM on my machine. Whatever the case might be, let's start figuring those things out and get it relative to your environment, what you've got going on. If I come down to the alerts, that'll be that area where we were going through and saying, well, instead of being we're saying proactive or reactive. The reactive metrics are where we set up those standards. The proactive ones is where I can come through and for any of my projects, for any of the models within my Revit Robot Clarity environment, all of those metrics I can say, tell me if something goes to a certain spot. So I can say if the number of user work sets goes and changes to go above 8, who knows what's right for you? You figure it out. If that happens, send me an email. Helps if you type it correctly. Send me an email if that number of user work sets goes above 8, because we've got a strict standard in our company. This is how we do things, and that standard has up to 5 user-defined work sets. I'm giving everybody a little bit of buffer. You might have something unique that comes around. If our standard is 5, but you go up to 8 or above, or in this case 9 or above, send me an email so I can go look at that file, and let's get ahead of things before bad stuff happens. All of those elements are coming through here so that we can start identifying and knowing what can we do to be beneficial. All of that coming back to this idea of we're looking to save time. We're looking to save you time so you can focus on those things that matter, and maybe go watch an award-winning movie once in a while. Go watch a sporting event. Go hiking, go walk and drop some of those calories out, whatever it's got to be. Let's do some things to give you the right data to help things out and get you better tomorrow than you were today. So there's an incredible number of things that we can have our robot help us out with. Sending files, receiving files, capturing metrics, automation of all those different elements, saving 280 hours per year per project annualized, and put that power to help you out. So I'm going to say that's all of the types of things that we've got with the Revit Robot. Let's get this robot out there for good and to your advantage. Thanks a bunch again for joining us, for taking the time to listen to me spout off and get on my soapbox here for a little while. And let's open this up to questions.
Sure. One moment while I end today's recording.